So hello, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to the first event of Space Week New York 2026, our virtual town hall. We've done a number of town halls over the years. We're doing something a little bit different this year. We're going to try to make it more interactive rather than presentation style with a Q&A at the end. We're going to kind of break this up into a couple of different segments, and we invite feedback, conversation. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll answer them along as we go. And then at the end of each section, we'll open it up to a Q&A and discussion. So like I said, this is the first event of the week. We are kicking off in style on this Monday evening. On the screen is a list of the events coming up. We're not going to do an exhaustive breakdown. But tomorrow is our day of virtual interviews. We're spotlighting a lot of fantastic companies and organizations that are active in New York space ecosystem. So if you haven't yet, sign up for some of those virtual conversations. I will be in person at the New York Consortium for Space Technology Symposium in Ithaca, networking with the group up there. If I'm lucky, getting a tour of their new research and testing facilities. I will have hopefully some updates and some pictures for the group down in the city later in the week. Wednesday, we have a couple of virtual events earlier in the day, and then we have our in-person New York City kickoff at the Luxembourg House, sponsored by the Luxembourg Trade and Investment Office and the Luxembourg American Chamber of Commerce. So that's a fantastic event. I believe it may already be sold out or close to being booked. So we look forward to seeing those that are attending on Wednesday. Thursday, we have a couple of virtual events earlier in the day, including a detailed breakdown of our recent needs assessment survey, as well as the Space Tech Playbook hosted at Cooley LLP. If you're able to attend that one, we encourage you to do so. Friday is the big day, courtesy of our amazing partners at the Intrepid Museum. We will be there all day long from 9 a.m. Through astronomy night programming, which runs all the way to 9 p.m. The formal full day program will run from 9 to 5. We have a number of expert panels, really fantastic breakout sessions on everything from space cybersecurity to space medicine, workforce development, defense. We're going to touch on a lot of different areas where New York really excels or is poised to excel in the broader space economy. There's going to be some great art exhibits. Plus, it's at the Intrepid Museum, which just existing at the Intrepid Museum is enough to make it an amazing day, in addition to all of the other fantastic programming that we're going to be having going on. So we are very grateful to the Intrepid for all of their assistance over the last year pulling this together. If you haven't signed up yet and are able to join us this coming Friday at the Intrepid, we really encourage you to do so. And then we're going to have a closing townhouse party on Saturday, just a relaxed, kind of high energy, fun way to just hang out with everyone and anyone in the space community and celebrate an amazing week. So we are kicking off this fantastic week of space-related programming. This is the fourth year we have done some version of Space Day or Space Week New York. This is the biggest and boldest one yet. So we thank all of you very humbly for your interest and excitement for this week. So that's a preview of what is coming up. So again, these are the sponsors for Space Week New York 2026. The Intrepid Museum, I have already discussed. We would not be here without them. So much of what is going to make this week special was because of them. Empire Space is also a longstanding member of the NASA New York Space Grant Consortium. We've done a lot of fantastic work with them over the years. They've supported us. So lots of great initiatives there. Imagine Milk is a really innovative space marketing and communications firm that operates in the city. Members of Imagine Milk will be at various events throughout the week, so we encourage you to say hello to them. Cooley, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is a law firm that's had members participate in some of our expert panels before. This year, they wanted to host a full event focused on the needs for the business and startup community. So we're very excited for that event. And then the Luxembourg Trade and Investment Office and the Luxembourg American Chamber of Commerce have been longtime friends of Empire Space, one of our earliest partners, really highlighting the unique aspect that New York has to its space economy, which is the international flavor that comes with all things New York. It's just a unique asset that New York has that no other state does. And Luxembourg has been very active about building ties between their space economy and ours, and we're honored to be partners with them. So we thank all of these sponsors for making this entire week possible. So for those who might not be as familiar with Empire Space, if you're new to Space Week New York and haven't joined us before, this is just kind of a brief overview of who we are. We are the research and networking hub of the New York space ecosystem. An ecosystem here is very broad. If it is anything related to anything having to do with utilizing or exploring outer space, we try to be aware of you. Our census, which is at the link there, empirespace.org/data, is a link to our census. It's the database of all of these different entities. These are private companies who some part of their portfolio deals with space. These are the colleges and universities that teach space-related programming, astronomy, physics, aerospace, manufacturing. This is the community groups and nonprofits like Empire Space or the Intrepid Museum, Rochester Museum and Science Center, Hayden Planetarium, that serve as those vital networking hubs, public communicators that bring space to people who aren't already involved in space. So the database is a comprehensive look at all of the different components of New York space ecosystem. And then we exist to understand this group. What is it good at? What are the challenges? How can it grow? What are the opportunities? And then we work to bring those into reality. We make introductions, we hold events, we conduct reports, we publish analysis to grow the system as a whole, create new job opportunities, bring new academic programs online, create new community programs, find that virtuous cycle and maximize it so that New York is achieving all that it can achieve in the 21st century space economy. We all know that space, particularly in light of the recently successful Artemis mission, inspires a lot of people. It touches on huge chunks of our economy and our daily lives. And there really is tremendous potential for New York to see significant job creation, significant academic program creation that really does make us a leader in all of these exciting fields that are growing in space in the 21st century. So we're a member of various organizations. We're an affiliate member of the NASA New York Space Grant Consortium. We're a founding member of the New York Consortium for Space Technology. Both of these groups are based out of Cornell. They do a lot of fantastic statewide work supporting academic organizations in the case of Space Grant or more the private sector. NYCST is backed by funding from the Department of Defense, building resiliency and redundancy into the American space manufacturing base. So that is the genesis behind them. And we are very active members of both of those organizations. So yeah, that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. And we exist to share these insights and these learnings with as many people as possible, and just create as much awesome space activity in New York as we can. So yeah, as I mentioned at the top, here's the outline that we're going to take into tonight's event. So we're going to discuss some really critical topics that we think are of relevance to broad sections of New York's space ecosystem. So we're going to kind of run through some of the highlights of our needs assessment report. And again, we'll do a little bit of presenting. We'll call on a couple people to do some discussion. And then we would love, if people have questions about slides, feel free to post them in the chat or raise your hand. And we'll kind of do these in groups. So you don't need to save your questions for the end, but we'll kind of take these in chunks, really try to foster some interesting conversation, answer some questions, see what the future might hold in these topic areas. And then, yeah, we look forward to hearing from you all and discussing some really cool stuff. So the first one. This is the Empire Space Needs Assessment. For those that have worked with us on this project, you're probably very well aware of what it is. For those that are new, probably have no idea what it is. So a little bit of background. This is a project that we developed at the request of and in conjunction with the New York Consortium for Space Technology. And this was a survey of the New York space companies that we have identified in our census. It's now, I forget the exact number off the top of my head, somewhere north of 320 And we tried to contact as many of them as humanly possible. And we developed a very comprehensive survey to just kind of get a health check on all of these different important areas. We asked, basic demographics, confirm that our information about your, operations and location is correct. But a lot of it focused on workforce needs. What are you struggling to hire? What are the talents you need access to that you don't have access to? Are you having trouble retaining staff? If so, why? Research and testing capability needs. What are you having to send, out of state to get tested? That's causing you time delays, cost delays. So we wanted to understand more about the capabilities that companies needed that are not currently available in the state. Government relationships and accessibility. How frequently do you talk to your local, state, and federal representatives? Are you finding those conversations productive? Particularly because so many companies indicate struggles with accessing government grants, government resources. We wanted to see how that connection was doing. We asked for just information about your financial health. Where are you struggling? All companies need more money, but we wanted to be more granular and specific with our questions. What type of funding are you struggling to access? Why? So we can then begin to program solutions for those challenges. And then the last section was really just about ecosystem connectivity. How often do you talk to other space-related organizations in New York? Do you partner with colleges? Do you work with other companies? Do you have suppliers in the state? Do you partner with community organizations? So it was a very broad spectrum survey. The final survey was somewhere between 70 and 80 questions, so it was very detailed. And we are going to share some of the very top line kind of highlights from each section for you all. If you have questions on a particular slide as we go to it, feel free to put them in the chat, and I can try to answer some while we're on that slide. If not, we can navigate back. So the first one here is a question about upskilling. So this was a question we asked to start to differentiate between our companies looking to hire fresh from the labor pool versus what skills they're looking to add on to their current workforce. We've learned there's a little bit of a distinction between how companies tend to approach and the solutions that would be proposed to help companies upskill their employees more. We weren't sure what we were going to see. Companies reported a very strong desire to upskill their existing employees. So this indicates that companies want to keep growing. They want to retain their current employees. They would prefer to find solutions within their current workforce. And so we need to find ways to assist them with that. eCornell, this is a project through NYCST, is working on developing some of these virtual training programs to provide flexibility. We think upskilling via remote means is probably a lot more flexible for companies rather than in person, although some skills can only be taught in person. So this confirms a need to have upskilling as a specific focus within conversations about workforce development, in addition to regular conversations about the collegiate pipeline in students that are graduating college. Both are very important conversations, but they're also very different conversations. And so this data confirms that companies need that. All right, you can go ahead to the next one, Evan. Yep. So research and testing needs. This was a big one. Most companies report some kind of limitation with their testing, but it's not uniform. Most companies are able to get the quality that they need wherever they need it. So that's not a dimension that really needs to be focused on. But the cost, accessibility, and availability, which is kind of broad spectrum. So they definitely need access to testing in a lot of different dimensions. So availability and accessibility cover most of what we assumed was lack of options within the state. This means that they're likely having to send, and this has been confirmed through anecdotal conversations that we've had over the years, that for a lot of these key testing needs, companies need to send their stuff out of state. They need to send prototypes, demos, whatever it is, out of state to have it done. That increases costs, that increases time, and they just have less control over that than they would otherwise. Some of these needs are being directly addressed by NYCST at Cornell. There are more detailed questions about specific testing capabilities that this survey asked, and some of those specific capabilities were actively incorporated into NYCST's programming as they began to bring and plan out new capabilities for their site at Cornell, which was the purpose of the survey, to ask companies what they needed and then find ways to bring those capabilities online. Regarding government engagement, it was very high. Most companies like government contracts. That is something that the vast majority of space and aerospace companies in New York are looking to access. What became clear was the award rate. The award rate is much lower than the application rate. So it's not an issue of encouraging companies to try to take advantage of these government resources. It's finding ways to make sure that they're more successful when they do, which is a different solution set. It's more complicated than informing companies like, hey, here are these opportunities. We need to ask follow-up questions and get a little bit more specific with what are the challenges? Why are companies failing to convert? But now at least we know what the right question is. Financial health. This we asked of the different types of investment vehicles, which are you most interested in accessing and which are the most difficult for you to access. Like the previous slide, there was a very strong preference for government funding. That was the highest priority of the options provided that companies indicated an interest in. It was also by far the one that they reported the most difficulty with, which again reinforces the need to figure out that connectivity between companies and mostly government here refers mostly to the federal government. So what needs do they have in converting these? And then are there beneficial conversations? Is there a stronger relationship between these companies and their federal representatives that may be helpful in increasing that conversion rate? And it kind of goes without saying, we are operating in New York. New York is home to Wall Street and just huge volumes of the global financial system, which again is a unique asset that only New York possesses. So finding ways to increase the exposure of New York-based space companies to that pipeline is absolutely essential. And then the final one on ecosystem connectivity. Most companies are, if they are connected with other space-based organizations in New York, it is not frequent. The never or once or twice a year response was usually the most common. Very few companies are, partnering on what would appear to be a regular basis, a weekly or a monthly basis. So it indicates that a lot of companies, if they do have connections, it's sporadic. It might be an annual event like a conference or something like that. And this also confirms our anecdotal evidence from over the years that most companies' prime relationships are usually out of state. Their prime suppliers, their prime customers tend to be located out of state, and they're generally not aware of the other space-related organizations operating in the state. It's gotten less common over time, but for the longest time, for the first couple of years that we were operating as Empire Space, we would meet new companies. We would show them everything that we found. We give them a tour of the census. And by far the most common response that we would receive was, we had no idea. just the lack of kind of internal self-awareness within New York's space ecosystem, stakeholders, companies, colleges just not being aware really of who else is operating in the state, doing what beneficial partnerships and connections may exist there. Everything tended to be pretty externally focused. That's changed a little bit in recent years. It's one of the core reasons that Space Week New York exists, to raise the visibility of New York's space ecosystem, not only to external partners, but to itself internally, so that all of these companies that we've identified are aware of who's operating in their own backyard. There might be suppliers, there might be customers that are very easy for them to access, but they're just not aware that they exist. So this was something that indicates that more work needs to be done on bridging gaps between these companies and the other space-related organizations operating in the state. But they all appear incredibly optimistic. Of all of the questions that we asked, this was the one that appears to be the most simple, and we thought, based on, there's all this conversation about challenges and things like that. New York space companies remain incredibly optimistic. We just asked them straight up, how optimistic are you? This is a kind of gut check barometer for how these companies feel about their operating environment. And despite the challenges that were reported in different areas, they remain optimistic, and most of them also reported an intention to hire in the next couple of years. So there is optimism, there is interest in growth, there are plans to grow, which is good, because you can't, unlike a new program or a new funding source, you can't manufacture optimism. That has to develop organically from the people that you're asking. And the fact that there already is this positivity sets us up so much better than if it didn't exist. If the not optimistic column here was the highest one, that poses a lot of challenges for generating interest, generating activity, creating engagement. The fact that companies are optimistic about the future bodes well for engaging them and finding ways to help everyone grow. So we were very heartened to see this answer. And this final one here, or this next one here, on anticipated expertise needs in the future. This one broke down. There were a lot of different answers, but a lot of it confirms needs for production and manufacturing, testing, research and development. So things in the broader hands-on building things aspect of the industry. People who have an ability to work a factory floor, or to bring a product into development, or to build out a new line. So those are needs that were reported to be very highly in demand, versus the less, the internal. No one's planning on hiring a lot more lawyers in the next couple of years. The HR specialists, finance and business operations, those skills are needed, but there doesn't appear to be tremendous demand for them. There is the demand, and this confirms another anecdotal thing that we've heard over the years, which is people need people with those hard skills, the ability to actually, design, build, and execute on a project. So yeah, that's kind of a highlight. We could have gone on for another 45 minutes straight if we wanted to on the needs assessment. There was a lot of data in there. A longer form summary is available at empirespace.org/reports. And then if anyone is interested in the full length 80-page PDF with a detailed question by question graphical breakdown, we have that and would be happy to share. Just email us, patrick@empirespace.org, evan@empirespace.org. So yeah, just to kind of sum up what all of that meant. In the category of workforce needs, highlighting the need for upskilling programs is something that resonated, and it's nice that it matches well with some existing efforts. It probably means that we need to find ways to scale those up in the future. Research and testing capability needs, very much in demand. NYCST is working to fill some of those gaps, but that's another, both within that site itself, more will probably need to be brought online, and then other capabilities will need to be brought online in the future. Government relationships and accessibility need mutual awareness to really maximize economic potential. Federal representatives have to know the needs of the space ecosystem here, and space companies need to be maximizing the relationships and the tools that their federal representatives can offer to increase that conversion rate when these companies go to seek access to the government funding that they are reporting they are very much interested in accessing. That kind of goes into financial health as well. And as always, deepening ties to Wall Street is critical. And then ecosystem connectivity. It just reinforces the need to hold more events like this, to deepen the connections. Other questions indicate companies have a desire for that level of connectivity. They just haven't been able to bring it into reality. So we're on the right track. We just need to keep going down it. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for a second and let people kind of soak this in. If people have questions, I guess feel free to unmute or put something in the chat. If anyone, we can hop back a slide if people want, just to see if people have questions, thoughts. Evan, I didn't know if you wanted to chime in with anything here.
I'll let everyone else talk first, but I can always add.
There's a question in the chat if the slides are going to be posted.
I don't know if we would post them. We can definitely make them available. Just email us. We'd be happy to discuss that.
And again, all the data and everything is on your website.
Yeah, the short form summary report is available, empirespace.org/reports. The full length question by question breakdown was too long to efficiently publish on the website. That does exist as a PDF. We'd be happy to send that around to anyone who is interested. Go ahead, Natalie.
Thank you. Really exciting and intriguing findings. I'm curious what you and the team feel is next now that you have this baseline assessment, and how much of it is within the scope of what Empire Space is built to do. You know, the ecosystem connectivity for sure, but you know, I'm assuming this has been shared with the key folks at Cornell and others that are part of this collective effort, but what's next? Like, what's the next chapter or the action to address some of the needs?
Fantastic question. You actually almost read my mind, because I realized we didn't highlight enough at the end there for what does come next. This is intended to be a series. Now that we have this baseline, we would like to run this type of survey, probably not annually, probably every 2 years would be our current pace. If we can get it to an annual pace, we would do that. But now that we have this kind of broad spectrum baseline, not only can we run this same kind of broad-based survey on a regular basis, we can now also run more detailed, targeted surveys. If we want to get more insights on, testing and capability needs, we can pull together, a 15, 20 question survey that really gets into some of the follow-ups from this report and send, that one around, so we can get more refined with our scope with this audience. We also plan on running additional surveys to other components of the ecosystem. We would love to do a survey of, the collegiate programs, college and university programs. Are you growing? Are you shrinking? What are your, challenges? What are your challenges with recruitment? Are you, where are most of your students graduating to? There's a whole world of interesting questions for the collegiate programs, because they're super critical in terms of workforce development initiatives. You could do one for the nonprofit groups, for the museums and the planetariums. What are your struggles? What are you seeing when people come in the door? Who are you partnering with? X, Y, Z. So there's kind of three different ways that the needs assessment process will go on. One is this broad-based business survey that will continue probably every 1 to 2 years with a similar question set to establish those trends over time. The second way is informing more targeted surveys to follow up on this data as it was gathered within this same universe. And then the third one is running a similar process with different cohorts within the space ecosystem. So the needs assessment process will always be going in some capacity, just depending on who we're looking to talk to at any given moment in time. But we're probably going to go ahead with the next round, planning out the next round this summer. Evan, did you want to hop in on this topic real quick? I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, which is sort of how we plan to approach the data question and improve sort of like the underlying data. But then I think there's also the side, which is sort of the solutions that we'll be building to the needs that we're identifying. So the needs assessment was initially and will hopefully continue to be sort of a project within the umbrella of NYCST, or the New York Consortium for Space Technology, which Pat spoke to earlier. And so I think sort of implicit in them seeing this as like a key need is to understand our needs. They're also on the other side of that, as a part of NYCST, trying to fund and create solutions around it. So that's why you see, like, I think in two cases, right, and under workforce needs and also the research and testing capabilities, Cornell or NYCST is already actively trying to solve these problems. They're trying to better apply the eCornell series to these needs. They're building out a key research and testing facility to solve a lot of these gaps in this industry, or at least in the industry in New York. So Cornell is like very actively going after these problems and trying to solve them. There's also funding within NYCST to continue to solve these kinds of problems. So as we better understand these needs, they will be funding more solutions, whether those will be put forward by Cornell or NYCST or members of NYCST, et cetera. So there's going to be, I would say, hopefully a lot of work coming out of NYCST to solve these needs. Where that doesn't address them, there are other things that Empire Space is doing. Obviously, we host events, we run Space Week. Hopefully this helps with connectivity. And then we're doing other things as well. We're helping people engage with legislators, improving, I guess, how stakeholders are represented across the state and hopefully federally, on and on. So there's a lot that we're doing to try to bring solutions towards these problems with our partners as well.
Thank you both. I think it's great to shine a light on where the needs are and to continue to drill deeper, but also start addressing and trying to work towards some of the solutions in concert with your partners. So that's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. That actually teed up a lot of things that we wanted to talk about. Thank you very patiently for waiting, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I had a question. So I'm pretty deep in the space ecosystem at this point, and most of my connections are either in Colorado, DC, Virginia. And so a little of my background, I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania originally, was just there for a couple months, family engagements. And so I came across something called the Keystone Space Collaborative. So they work in Ohio, PA, and West Virginia. And so at the same time, I came across this, which is based in New York. But I say all that to say one of the initiatives they had worked on with Keystone Space, because they're also trying to get the word out, I told them, I didn't really think there was pretty much any space companies here in Pittsburgh at all when I was there. And I'm deep in the system. Pittsburgh just wasn't on the map. And they're like, you have to be kidding me. So I say all this to say they had done research similar to this, but what they did was also pull all the companies and pull all the companies specifically that were either prime or subcontractors, and they had that whole list and things like that. There was like over 700 and some, and I like almost fell off my chair. I'm like, you have to be kidding me, because I had no idea. So I was just wondering, do you have numbers like that of what's present in New York City? Because quite honestly, I didn't think there was anything here either. I've never looked here for anything. I just didn't think space existed in New York City. So, and I've been here almost 20 years.
let me hop over I think, what is our total? Our total count, we have two different counts for space companies. We have unique space companies and then the number of sites that they operate at. Because there's a number of the primes, like Lockheed has multiple facilities in the state. L3Harris has multiple facilities in the state. So right now, our total count for the number of space company sites in the state is 426. It's somewhere in the 300s that are operating across all of the categories of the census. And I think if I'm correct, Evan is about to share his screen to show the Empire Space census has over 1,500 entries. This is between, hey, there it is. So this is between, you know, all the private companies, all the finance firms that invest in space, all the colleges and universities that have space programming, all the K through 12 schools that have space-related programming, all the planetariums, all the museums, all the observatories, all the astronomy clubs, all of them together. Evan, can you scroll up to the top real quick? Is 1,643. That is the number of unique entries across all of the different tables. And just a quick note for anyone who navigates here, this map is interactive. So the middle blob is not, but all of the other squares that stem off of this take you to the relevant table. So you just navigate down to one, click on it. Evan, pick your choice. And it takes you right to that particular table. And then within each table, we have company name, general focus, specific focus, if we're aware of the employment, if we're aware of annual revenue, social media, location, brief description, region, and then the two columns on the end are the Assembly and the Senate district. We intentionally included them for every entry because it makes it, the goal there is to facilitate a two-way street in the sense that stakeholders are now aware of who their representatives are, but we're also able to reverse engineer it on the back end for each Assembly and Senate district and figure out who is operating in any given member's district. We've had some of these conversations with legislators who have reached out before, and now we're able to go to them and say, hey, you represent, you know, these three space companies, they specialize in this, they employ this many people, you have these college programs here, XYZ. So we can kind of do those analyses as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on in New York. Just a little bit of background. When Evan and I started this just about 5 years ago, we got into this, and our first question was, well, okay, who's doing what related to space in the state of New York? Because you can't grow an ecosystem if you don't know who's in it. So we started this question, and we were aware of some of the big ones, like we knew Cornell, you know, Columbia and everything like that. We now have more than 60 colleges and universities in there. We knew of some of the major companies, L3Harris, Lockheed Martin. We did not know that there were going to be well over, you know, 300. So there was a lot more going on here than we anticipated. And then, so we had this realization like, wow, there's a lot going on, you know, related to space in New York. We had no idea. And then what we almost simultaneously realized is, wow, no one has any idea. When we got started, there was no statewide space entity. There was the NASA New York Space Grant, but they were really the only space organization with any kind of statewide focus. There were a handful of others, but as anyone who's been in New York for a while, you know, we tend to kind of piece ourselves off. You know, upstate, downstate, you know, the city versus Long Island, you know, different industries. And we found that kind of same regionalization and fragmentation within the space ecosystem. People focused on their own little corner of the state or their own little corner of the industry. Most of their partners were located out of state, and no one was really aware. There wasn't any visibility in Albany. There was no kind of, you know, programming. So that is the gap we stepped into to fill, and that led us here. So yeah, thank you for the question, Amanda. That actually gave us a chance to kind of highlight the census a little bit. Building that has been the kind of core of our work now for the last 5 years, and we're still adding new entries. New companies will relocate to the state. We'll become aware of them. We'll add them in there. We'll become aware of people that are operating that we weren't aware of. That still happens. we'll still meet people now 5 years later that they've just been kind of quietly humming away, and we didn't pick them up in any of our earlier searches, but it is reasonably full. So yeah, thank you for that. Hey, New York Space Business Roundtable shout out. We've participated with them a couple of times. Thank you to whoever's joining us from Hughes. So yeah.
I think there was also a question from Natalie on, I guess, how robotics and embedded intelligence is represented in the census.
So it's
yeah, you can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so there are robotics firms in there, but only if they have a space nexus. Like it doesn't include all robotics firms. One of the things we've explored, there's a gradient to things. You know, some things are obviously space. You know, you launch rockets, you do space. But the gradient between, you know, space and aerospace and aviation, it's not, you know, like a hard, you know, black and white line where it's, you know, you do space, you don't do space. So there's AI firms in there, there's some quantum firms in there, there's some robotics firms in there. It's not the majority of firms, but if they have some kind of space or aerospace nexus, you know, if you're developing, you know, robots for use on the International Space Station, or if you're using, you know, quantum computing to crunch, you know, telescope data or something like that. So if you have one of those kind of secondary fields with a space nexus, you make it.
Yeah, I would just say, like, maybe for a more general, but like sort of like teach you how to fish answer. If you go to our census empirespace.org/data and you go to the space companies, you could just like Control F and type in robot or robotics, and you'll see at least the ones that we've flagged as having a robotics component, whether it's like in the comments or in one or two cases we've highlighted they have a specialization in robotics, or at least able to get a start just going to the website and seeing which companies actually fit that filter. Maybe we should move on to the next section, and then if we have more questions here, we can always come back at the end.
Yeah.
Cool.
So thank you for the wonderful questions on the needs assessment and the census that gave us a chance to highlight some really cool things. So now the second section, we have some other folks on the call who are going to help fill out some additional details. Evan, you want to hop slide? Thank you. Is workforce development. So this is kind of, it's been a buzzword for a while. You know, companies can't grow if they don't have, you know, employees, and colleges are looking to graduate, you know, their students into successful careers. But building that pipeline successfully is a challenge. It requires focus. It requires understanding, you know, in terms of what companies need versus what colleges are providing. We've kind of been anecdotally aware, and the needs assessment kind of confirmed that there are a lot of people with, you know, bachelor's degrees or graduate degrees looking for work. You know, there's lots of people who have experience in HR or business. You know, those aren't the fields that companies have been reporting that they need help hiring. It's the machinists. It's the optical technicians. It's the people who are able to actually build a product. And for the first couple of years, we knew that workforce development was going to be important, making sure that the pipeline that New York academic institutions was generating was properly suited for the needs of New York's space ecosystem. And then in the last year and a half, we've gotten plugged into a number of really cool workforce development related initiatives. So we're going to kind of focus on a couple of ways that the New York space economy is trying to build out the workforce development portfolio and make sure that we have these programs in place to help companies maximize their growth potential. So we have the Intrepid Museum Working Group Again, Intrepid comes up because they have become so instrumental to so much of what we do here at Empire Space. They've been operating now for, I think, almost a year, convening stakeholders and bringing resources. We mentioned NYCST and developing their eCornell series. We at Empire Space are working on, this has been a long time, multi-year goal. It's not quite here yet, but we are much closer to bringing it to reality, which would be a formal job board. Just a place where you can go to see the active job postings for New York-based space companies in a way that New York-based space students or job seekers would be able to interact with them. We have recently finished a report on that, so we'll be able to jump into that a little bit. We will continue to discuss, conduct research, follow up on the needs assessment, get more granular with some of these workforce development needs. And there seemingly have been a flurry of applications or interest in applying for various NASA workforce development related programs. So I know we have some folks here. We have Linda Kennedy from Intrepid, and we have Dahlia Rappaport from Empire Space, who are going to touch on a couple of these in a little bit more detail. We just have a couple of slides we want to kind of pull together to highlight things, give some graphical representation, and then we'll just open it up to discussion. So Evan, if you want to hop on the next one. So yeah, this actually comes from the recent jobs opening report that we at Empire Space published, courtesy of work of one of our team members, Dahlia Rappaport. She is on the call with us tonight. And so this, actually, Dahlia, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Before, do you kind of want to just inform the group of what your process was, like how you went about gathering all this up? And then if you want to, you can just go ahead and speak to the slide.
Yeah, sure thing. So I manually was able to build a data set that looks at hiring demand across New York space and aerospace sector. We surveyed over 320 companies, collected all publicly available job postings manually, kind of did it, down and dirty. And it resulted in over, as you can see on the slide, 1,600 open roles, which is quite a few. And it's just model data, so not estimates. It's kind of just that snapshot of active hiring demand, which was really awesome to get. I think the goal here was to more so establish a baseline, because there's a lot of discussion clearly about the growing space economy, but very little clarity on where the jobs actually exist and who's hiring and what constraints will shape those jobs. So as you can see, that's kind of shown here. 40% of these companies were actively hiring. We did want to highlight that only 2% were remote, and the location and facilities really did matter, as well as the location throughout New York. So Western New York and Long Island had the majority, and then New York City did hold about 183 openings, so quite a few. And then as you can see here, it is a concentrated and constrained labor market right now, because 75% of these jobs are coming from about 34 companies out of those 320 companies. So you can see that there is a very high dependency on a few employers, which is important to highlight. And then 40 to 45% of the roles did require citizenship and job clearance, which is something that Empire Space wanted to highlight as well, just to give that larger snapshot of what may or may not be requiring clearance for talent pools. Obviously, that will exclude a large talent pool. And then it was around $50,000 to $60,000 for production roles, and then $100K plus engineering software. We did want to just snapshot the salaries as well. So those were the averages on production versus engineering. We just really wanted to make a bottom line that the access is currently limited. Mobility could be arguably weak, but the system is just highly concentrated. And we clearly do have a lot of job openings through the state of New York, but these things are very important to highlight when we're doing this workforce data. And
If you want, I could take over here.
yeah, that could be good.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Dahlia, for the fantastic analysis and the report and everything. I guess one thing to say before we open this up into a discussion is just that that's like sort of a sneak peek or a preview at the data and the report that Dahlia put together. So this is soon to be published on our website, empirespace.org/reports, where we've seen the other reports that we've spoken to a few times tonight. So if you're like very interested and sort of curious what the full report looks like, it should be up soon. So stay tuned. We just had a few questions we wanted to raise here, sort of coming out of this this analysis and this data, or maybe some sort of suggested next steps or pathways, opportunities maybe. So to speak to those, and I think we can open this up to a discussion in the same way that we did with the first segment. The first one was around sort of maybe taking advantage of the employer concentrations with such a concentrated labor market in just a few of the space companies here. Maybe we can leverage essentially partnerships or relationships with those companies and help really reshape and sort of connect this pipeline in New York. So we could maybe talk about that. As far as workforce access, it was highlighted that there's essentially barriers with clearance, as well as citizenship, or I guess U.S. person status, and sort of how, at least in New York, where you have a pretty large international community, how that really does end up sort of limiting the connection between the talent in New York and the companies here. And so, maybe we're able to think of ways to try to address this this conflict, or to sort of better connect the labor and the companies within these constraints. For mobility pathways, we highlighted essentially sort of where the salary bands are and sort of the distribution of compensation in New York. But sort of looking at that and seeing that there are a substantial number of roles sort of in the, let's say, like the $50,000 range, thinking about sort of how to help move our labor market and sort of the talent up in terms of like sort of the value of their contributions and sort of get them to those higher paying roles. Within regional strategies, there's obviously very different labor markets or talent pools and employers in the different regions in New York. This is common sort of every time we talk about New York space. The different regions and areas in New York look very different. So sort of thinking about how to better approach those individually in ways that make sense for those regions, in sort of understanding how those how the labor and the talent looks different, how the companies look different, and better approaching them with that understanding. And then lastly, on sort of like the hidden demand side, we talked about how, where we're seeing a lot of these opportunities, but there's also sort of an assumption that there are probably many more smaller firms that are just not hiring in the same public way, that maybe they have roles at them, but it's not as publicly available online. And so there's a question of also how to approach those smaller firms that sort of have this hidden demand, how to better address that and sort of connect people looking for opportunities or labor and talent in New York to those smaller firms. So these are just some of the questions and sort of opportunities that we were thinking about, but this is certainly a great time to have a bigger conversation around, which of these makes sense, how could we better approach these, which interventions would actually move these constraints in maybe the near term, like 12 to 24 months. And also, yeah, we definitely want to bring in Linda. I know Linda's been doing a lot of work at the Intrepid around workforce development, so I'm sure she has some thoughts here as well, if there's anything she wants to go back on as far as workforce development.
No, just to say, first of all, you all are wonderful, and this is incredible data, and I'm seeing excitement in the chat over the reports. These pieces are all here. We've worked a lot in the New York City area, being the home of the largest NASA artifact in the Northeast and a bunch of other elements in aerospace, to connect youth earlier in the pipeline, right? That sort of young kids through young adults into exposure, and then some early work experiences in aerospace, and then into college. But then what, right? So that's where we've been really thinking, like, how do we join these pieces together so that is a ready pipeline for these gaps in employment or employee skilled workers. And then we also have a large, this just came up and this keeps bubbling up in another area, We also have a large audience of returning veterans who also, with some minimal upskilling, could go into this workforce. It's a whole population that needs work, that has skills. So I think just a lot of thought, and all of this work is really fantastic for seeing how do we join these pieces that exist together and get talent into the workforce.
Go for it, Natalie.
So I'm going to go with number 4. I feel like it's a game show. That's behind door number 4. The regional strategy. So one thing I think about, and like, let's go Red, very big excitement around Cornell. We visited for my son. My husband went there. We actually met with Professor Peck and like totally, impressed with everything they're doing there. Could a regional strategy ladder into academic institutions in Western New York, in the Long Island area, and New York City? Because you have a concentration of people, and we can hope career services, career officers, and sometimes like within the engineering school at Cornell, there's dedicated career services, interview techniques, resumes, career fairs for those in the school, and indeed niching down to space. I have to imagine they're not the only ones. So could the regional strategy in some way, at least maybe not start, or maybe it does, but deeply involve and entrench with the colleges and universities in those 3 different parts of the state? And maybe there are co-op programs. Maybe there are internships or apprenticeships that could be a part of this to show the pathways for these students while they're still either undergrad or in the combined graduate programs, so they can literally see what work and being part of the workforce near where they're already going to school.
And I would argue that it could get even lower because through BOCES or career and technical education, because a lot of the job gaps are in positions that don't require 4-year degrees necessarily and require a different kind of apprenticeship or skills training.
Okay.
So that the conversation could be wider. But yeah, it's hard because there are these kind of systemic barriers. All these different colleges are siloed from industry. Colleges are siloed in a weird way from K through 12. So to break down those silos and get people thinking in more imaginative ways around this is a big deal. I went to a space economy conference and they were talking about how, for example, in a lot of colleges, it's like so pure research, but they're not thinking of market applicability for any of their work, and that they need to be bringing in collaborating with people from the schools of business, the engineering students need to be collaborating in working groups with business students, with marketing students, with medical students, if that's what they're looking in space medicine. Like it needs to be cross-disciplinary in a way that right now it's not.
Pat, you're muted.
Thank you for reminding me. I made it over an hour before I did that. And so, I'll take that. But thanks. There's actually a couple different things I wanted to follow up with on your point, Natalie. One is this question kind of does feed into, I don't know if you remember from the census map, but we break down the state into the same 10 regions that are used by Empire State Development. So fostering those kind of regional clusters is kind of just a broad-based goal for us on a whole bunch of different levels, but it fits neatly into the workforce development component. And it brings up my second point, which is an anecdote that I'll provide. So I'm from Rochester, upstate, well outside of the city, for those who are not familiar. And our big thing up here is optics. We were still technically we're the home of Kodak, but no one, far fewer people work there now than they did, when I was born. So Rochester has a very strong optics legacy. You see that in most of the major telescopes that go up these days. Their optics at some point come through Rochester. The University of Rochester is still one of the prime schools for optics. And this is about a year and a half ago, we had a conversation with one of the professors at Monroe Community College, which is the community college up here for the greater Rochester area. And they have an optics technician program. And as a U of R grad, I knew so many people who would go into optics. They would do it for their 4-year undergrad, and then they would disappear into the PhD program. I'd come back for a 10-year reunion. They'd still be in the PhD program doing optics. And then I talked to this professor, and I'm like, oh, it must be really easy for you to hire here, because we graduate all of these optics students from U of R. And she's like, I don't need more 10-year, PhD students. I need more people who can go onto a factory floor and refine a mirror that's going to go into space. She's like, we have so many optics firms around here. My program is graduating about 12 students a year. If I satisfied the demand for all of the companies that come to me every year asking how many students I'm going to be graduating, I would need to be graduating 1 to 200. So it's about right sizing those and applying the right regional focus. Because for Rochester, we need a regional focus around optics, because that's what we're good at. But for other regions, in Western New York, where so much of the activity, as Dahlia's report pointed out, is based around Moog, that's a different, hiring set. They need more technicians who are going to be able to work on rocket engines and things like that. Whereas if you go down to New York City, you have a lot more of the startups, the spin-ups, the tech, economy, Brooklyn Navy Yard and stuff like that. Whereas on Long Island, it's a lot of those small to mid-sized legacy aerospace partners that came up when Northrop Grumman and Lockheed were still major players out there. And their workforce is now aging out. So you have these precision manufacturing and machining shops that are still supplying NASA customers, even though the primes that used to operate next door have relocated out of state, that have kept most of their employees for the last 40 plus years, who are now all retiring, and they don't have the number of applicants they need to fill those roles. So every region in the state has different needs. And then, yes, Amy, not as much engagement with high schools. That's starting to change, mostly because it's tougher to track which high schools do programming. Some of them do like rocketry and stuff like that. But working with Intrepid, and Linda's point was spot on, working with the younger audiences, working with some of those other programs, figuring out, and that's another thing, figuring out who is doing stuff that is adjacent but could be space related but isn't yet. If you have a machining program through, a BOCES program somewhere, it might not be space focused, but could easily become space focused with, minimal effort and focus. So that full pipeline, the K through college, I know it's kind of a hokey saying, but that really is what you need to build out from a workforce. So sorry for ranting a bit much, but Natalie, your question brought up a whole bunch of questions. I hope that answered a little bit.
Thank you so very much.
Great. I would say, especially since you're looking to build out the job board, think about, if you aren't already, you probably are, some kind of like heat map or something that shows with the jobs where graying workforce, need for machinists, like something that highlights that in a visual or visualization way, because just having job listing, company, what they're looking for is different than being able to visualize, oh, well, I live on Long Island and I want to stay here, so this is what's available in this area. Or I want to stay up in the, North Country, as they call it, and I want to not go more than 10, 20-mile radius, so what's around me? Like literally, I don't know if heat map is a dirty word or, but you know what I'm saying? Not just having another job board, forgive me, that lists things, but something that brings the data and the insights you've just described to life.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just say
Excellent.
to you, Natalie, that's definitely on the roadmap. There's like a whole path forward that we have planned as far as where we go from this first pass of data on jobs and opportunities at companies to having like a functioning sort of autonomous or autonomously maintained jobs board, and like with its own analytics and everything. And so we certainly plan to have like categorization of jobs and understanding of the qualifications and requirements associated with each of them. So that will all be there in time. It's been a work in progress, but hopefully soon. I put this in the chat. So something I wanted to highlight. I guess it's like sort of preliminary on this jobs conversation, and we probably should move forward soon. But as far as like workforce development proposals, I think with a lot of these discussion topics, I keep thinking back to a recent proposal that a few of the stakeholders in like the New York space ecosystem proposed on. It's from NASA. It's called NAS Hubs. This was submitted recently between a few of us. And I would say that it outlined it in a pretty interesting way, sort of the kinds of stakeholders that NASA sees as far as sort of who you need to bring together here. So we were talking about like, high school versus college versus sort of like companies and the different kinds of key stakeholders here. So it's just interesting to see sort of how they framed it and sort of who they required you to be partnered with as far as which of those categories. So nothing to say there yet, but hopefully some good progress soon as far as like support for these workforce development initiatives in New York.
I wanted to just address really quickly
Yeah.
wasn't Amanda talking about the college because they can't, all the news is that nobody can get a job, right? But this is where that upskilling, I know upskilling was referenced in your report in terms of internal employees, but someone who's coming out with an undergraduate degree might not need a whole other master's degree. They might need some kind of certification to be able to move into the aerospace field where there are jobs. And so that's where this eCornell's modules in aerospace will be useful. Vaughn College, these are all people that I just happen to know about, but they don't have to commit to a whole other degree program, but maybe with just a little tweaking, they could make themselves marketable into this field. So that might be something at some point to offer in addition to a jobs board, just a sort of trending skills needed and where to find them.
Yeah, that's definitely a thought we'll follow up on. Thank you for bringing that up again, Linda.
Cool. All right. We can come back to this topic if we have time at the end. I think we'll move on to the last segment that we had planned. I can maybe introduce this, but I believe, we have Quadri here who runs a lot of our events as well. So I'll probably pass it off to him after a brief introduction. So I'll just, I guess, introduce this by saying sort of what we said at the top, which is one of the big things we do at Empire Space is we do host, a substantial number of events, or I guess we have like a large New York space ecosystem event programming function. Obviously, we're all here during Space Week New York, so you probably already recognize that, or at least it's sort of implied. But we do other things throughout the year, and we see this as a pretty critical effort of ours. Why? So I think this goes back to some of the other things we talked about, but for example, in the needs assessment, it became at least like quantitatively obvious that a lot of the stakeholders are, interested but lacking engagement and connectivity in New York. This was something that we experienced. This is probably the first problem we experienced when we started Empire Space, was seeing sort of how little exposure there was and how little connectivity there was between people in New York and the space ecosystem that exists here. And so we see these events and sort of community building as a very obvious and very effective way to try to at least start to solve this problem. So that's why we're doing it. We've been doing this Space Week obviously for this is I think our 4th year now. We try to host about one event a month. If we're not hosting an event a month, there's at least multiple other events that we're promoting throughout that month. So we really try to keep the New York space ecosystem actively engaged with programming and sort of connecting with each other. We have some questions on the screen. I'll probably pass it over to Quadri to say some more before we sort of open this up to a discussion.
All right, evening, everyone. I'm just going to build up on whatever just Evan just went over, which is essentially, the past year after last year's Space Week has seen a lot of events and gatherings in the space community here in New York, from our happy hour every month to partnered events with the hardware meetup. I don't know if you were in town last month. We had the demonstration event with the New York Tech Alliance that saw a lot of startups present a lot of cool technology, and I've heard some interesting technology being developed at that event. So that's one of our more popular events that we saw last month. And obviously this month we have a Space Week happening. I'm going to let the week speak for itself, but I'm hoping to see a lot of you there this week, because I'm looking at this list. These are people I haven't met before, which I think as a positive thing that the community is growing. That's essentially the takeaway is the community in this city has grown over the past 2 years that I joined Empire Space. It's become something else, and that's a positive thing. Some of the partnerships we've had over the last year. Some of these events have happened with us just being in attendance. We've seen people coming in, wanting to host events, wanting to partner with us, which reminds me, if you are in the future looking to partner with Empire Space for an event, we're always here, happy to co-host, happy to attend event, happy to sponsor those events. Well, not sponsor, but sponsor marketing-wise those events as well in the future. But some of the events that we have in the future are going to be focused on what we hear from you guys, and that's how this year's Space Week is structured. The feedback we got last year on how we should run events, what events should look like, is why the monthly happy hour is came to be. You wanted a more relaxed environment to be able to not only socialize but discuss the future of space industry, to be able to essentially collaborate. And that came about a monthly series of happy hours where people are allowed to just, in an informal setting, talk about what their ideas and what collaboration looks like. And then we have the more structured events like the hardware meetup or the demonstration events, where people have the ability to pitch their ideas and what they're working on, and essentially shine a light on what they've been working on, and essentially get more visibility with either partners or sponsors or even investors. So again, I'll let Space Week this year speak for itself, but that is essentially the energy that we're bringing this year. And I can't wait to hear from you guys when it comes to feedback on our events, because that's how we're going to model the rest of the year and eventually Space Week 2027. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys, and I'm going to open it up to kind of touch on a few of these bullet points that we have here. Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
Thank you so much. I'm very invigorated. I wonder, is there any intentionality on programming in the coming months or year to be part of solving the issues identified in the needs assessment? Because I think there's always a place in a space for happy hour, for technical, for hardware, for hackathons, but you have identified some really important issues, and who better to kind of crowdsource or to at least use as a larger focus group than maybe some of the community. I'm not saying have them do the work, that's not the idea, but you know, if you're looking to try to address skills gaps or any, you know, pick one, and maybe it's a very intentional ask that it's a time when someone from a couple of the academic institutions, someone from the Intrepid can be in the room where it happens, but it's not that they're getting up and talking at the people or presenting, but maybe it's some kind of facilitated workshopping, a design thinking-esque, I don't know. I mean, you can get into the how, but if there's an appetite and an interest to meet, perhaps it can be married with trying to dig deeper in solving and the solutioning of where there are gaps and needs already identified.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great. I'll add to that and say that it's not just the needs assessment. We're also, I would say, a large part of Space Week this year, and especially like the conversations we're going to be having at the New York Space Forum on Friday, both the panels and the breakout sessions. A big takeaway, or I should say, a big difference, but something that we really want to sort of do new this year is have sort of like path forwards and like essentially like documents and plans and things that come out of these panels and these conversations. And so part of that will be started in those conversations during Space Week, but I think there will certainly be a lot more work to be done as far as the actions and the questions coming out of those initial conversations. So I think it's not just the needs assessment. There will probably also be a lot coming out of Space Week that will expect us to have more conversations around it. So I think it's a great idea. Yeah, over to you, Pat.
Yeah, I just wanted to note something that Quadri said, and I want to thank him for bringing it up, which is particularly when it comes to events with a lot of our, portfolio, but particularly with events, we are incredibly responsive to feedback. It was one of the major things from last year's events, what type of social events people wanted to see. And then we very deliberately tried to bring that into reality. The breakout sessions that we're planning this year have a lot more thought and build out to them because people responded so positively to them last year. So this is just an echo saying, we always remain open to feedback. If you have thoughts, please feel free to ping them out to us like, hey, this would be, fun to do. We always try to bring those into reality. So I want to thank him for bringing that up. It's not like we decide what the events are and put them all out. We very much respond to community feedback.
And just to add on, Natalie, if you have any like specific ideas on, what created an event centered around solving a problem that we've already identified looks like, I would love to hear from you during Space Week, after Space Week. I'm sure Evan and Patrick will not be opposed to also hearing that idea and also see what that would look like in, say, a month or two.
I would welcome it, and I will be there Friday, but that may not be the right moment. But I'd love to do a one-on-one or whatever is, seen as valuable, or meeting up for a coffee. But my background is in events and building community, so I feel like there could be some symbiosis. But it's your baby, and I'm not looking to do anything but just amplify and support it in a way that's seen as goodness.
Awesome. I'm excited.
To continue the metaphor, the baby has definitely grown. The first couple of years when this was, Evan and I huddled around, spreadsheets on a Google Drive. But now, we hope for this to take on, a life of its own and continue to spiral further than things that we can directly control or program. The goal of building a vibrant community is that it thrives and exists and grows, on its own. I just wanted to add that in there. Thank you for posting the link, whoever's joining us from Hughes.
Yeah, I would maybe we'll close the slides and then we can have any go back to open Q&A with the time that's left. Okay. Take that as a yes.
Yeah, that works.
All right. So I think just to sort of restate the week ahead, seeing as this is the first event of the week, which is for us a really nice way to start the week. So I'm not going to, same as before, I'm not going to list everything on the screen here, but I'll just say, looking forward to seeing people throughout the week. Pat will be at the NYCST Symposium in Ithaca tomorrow. So if anyone's going to that, to try to catch him there. The rest of us will be pretty active hosting these various spotlights throughout the day, tomorrow and Wednesday. So we'll be talking to a bunch of very interesting stakeholders in the New York Space ecosystem, whether they're founders or other like sort of interesting characters doing very novel things in the space industry from here in New York. So should be some pretty interesting conversations. We'll then kick off our in-person programming at Lux House on Wednesday. It's looking to be a great event. It's already sold out. We have many more events throughout the week as well, additional in-person and virtual. And, you know, of course, the big event for the week is going to be the New York Space Forum at the Intrepid Museum on Friday. That's a full day. We're very excited for that. That event does still have availability. So if you haven't registered yet, please register. I think it probably will sell out by the end of the week, but you can still get in now. So if you want to come, please do. I think the other thing to highlight is that even what's on the screen is not everything that's happening. These are just the events that we're able to fit on the screen. So there's actually a lot more that's not on the screen. So if you go to spaceweeknewyork.com, we have, you know, our schedule page, which is sort of our course schedule. Then there's also a page for community events, which are events from people in the space community. And there's actually quite a few events on that side as well. So there's a lot happening throughout the week this week. So please go to the website, check out what's interesting to you, register for what you're interested in. We hope to see you, you know, whether it's on the screen or at these events throughout the week.
Yeah, I did just, Evan, on that note, real quick, this year, you can go to the final slide, but this year's event is truly statewide. Not only will I be attending the symposium in Ithaca tomorrow, but the community space events page has events in Rochester, the Hudson Valley, and Long Island. These are stargazing events. These are happy hours. The Rochester Philharmonic is doing a 2-day concert series just called Space with an exclamation point that just happens to have been scheduled for the end of this week. So that was another point that I think if I had to highlight one point to end this is we wanted Space Week year over year to become more and more statewide. We did not want it to be a New York City centric event. There's nothing wrong with New York City. I lived there for a number of years. I love New York City. But as someone who grew up outside of New York City, there is a lot else happening in the state. And so we're very excited that there are events for people to attend outside of New York City in person this year. So every year we continue to grow and add new programming on. And as my final note for the night, I just wanted to say thank you so very much to everyone who joined us and contributing to a very lively and informative discussion. That's exactly what we wanted to have happen on some really important topics for us and for the New York space economy and ecosystem. Incredibly excited to get down to the city and meet folks in person later this week.
So people, we could wrap it here. If you have more questions, I think we could keep Q&A going for a little bit, or we could just call it now.
Thank you both. It's looking forward.
Got a hand up from Hughes, I believe.
Yeah, we had a hand.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I was trying to give you an applause. But if I did ask a question, what do you think is the biggest driver in the space economy right now in New York?
I could take it, I guess. So, I mean, it depends how you want to define it. But if we're going to define it the way that Empire Space defines it, I would say we look at the space economy or the space ecosystem sort of holistically. And so that's not just space companies that are, you know, building rockets or launch vehicles. It's sort of everyone that's touching space. And so that includes investors, other sort of like financial resources like accelerators, incubators. It includes all the things that Pat talked about when he spoke about the census earlier. And so my answer to this question would be obviously the finance side that's touching the space industry. We're the second largest state as far as investment activity in the US, depending on how you cut it. As far as later stage investment, we're the first. So we're the largest later stage investor in the space industry. As far as early stage, like VC, we're the second to California. So we're hugely active as far as investing in the space industry, whether or not people realize that. So to me, that's the obvious answer, but I think you have to include it you have to include finance in that sense.
And I would just to chime in on this one real quick. Something that we started to kind of build out as a theme last year that we got a lot more deliberate about this year is focusing on what New York does really, really well when it comes to space. You know, when we talk about space in New York, people are like, "Oh, you're never going to be able to launch rockets from there." We're like, "Okay, no, there is never going to be a Cape Kennedy, you know, style launch facility here in New York." But there are so many other things that go into space. We are a key hub for space medical research. There are a number of really fantastic college and medical research programs that operate here in New York. The Aerospace Medicine Biobank is in Manhattan. Optics, which I mentioned earlier, we are one of the premier, you know, optics destinations for space and non-space based optics in the world. So finding out what those unique assets that New York has that we do really well in space and leaning into those to ensure that we're maintaining that leadership, we're growing that leadership. And then, yeah, to kind of echo what Evan said is some of those unique assets. You know, we're home to Wall Street. We're home to the UN. There is a finance and international dimension to doing business in New York that other states would not be able to replicate if they spent a century trying. And so it's finding ways to make sure that we're leveraging those assets as well. So those are kind of the I guess, broader frameworks that I would use to answer that question. Go ahead, then.
Yeah, I would just, I guess, to keep riffing on this, but hopefully be concise. This is sort of how we tried to focus Space Week last year, and to generalize it into one word, it was sort of like the adjacencies from the space industry to all the larger industries that already New York is either a leader in or just extremely active in. So it's a lot of things that Pat said, but like, to add even more, it's things like law, insurance, art. These are places where New York already leads. And so these adjacencies, or like the areas where space overlaps with these other industries, they're sort of smaller or sort of like niche right now, but that will not be true. As the industry grows, they're going to become very important, and they're where New York is already leading. So I think that's sort of, maybe to like put a bow on it, that's also, you know, sort of how we see Space Week this year. Whereas last year was talking about New York being a leader in those adjacencies. This year it's really talking about how to leverage what New York's strengths are, how to make plans around sort of how to make New York better. So this year is more of a focusing on action and sort of like a path forward. But yeah. Cool. We could wrap it. Oh, maybe another question.
Can I speak for a second? I think that's great. I think that it's important that you finally mentioned insurance and art in general. These are things that you lead in, and most certainly finance. If we can get access to more people who are willing to just have an audience with us so that we can get more funding, I think that's a great thing that you could do for this entire community. And then on top of all that, again, we're eventually going to need congressional approval for certain things. So having that access to your political leaders is going to be something that you guys can be a leader in.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, hopefully you're coming to the Space Forum on Friday. We'll have a pretty fantastic art exhibit going, space art exhibit going. So you'll be able to see some of the New York space art in person. And we have speakers from insurance, law, etc. Some really interesting leaders at these adjacencies or intersections. So yeah, please come. I think there was a question in the chat, but also we are a little over. I don't know if we want to keep going or if we want to give everyone the rest of their night back.
I don't know if you just want to take Amit's question real quick, and then I think we can probably wrap it. We did run a little late, but that's a good thing.
Sure. So the question's around opportunities to scale hardware development in the New York area, similar to LA or Denver. We might have like slightly different answers on this depending on who you ask on the team, but I think the way I would say it is New York is a very large state. This is something that we are often reminding people about, is that New York is not just New York City. And so there's different opportunities that present themselves throughout New York. I don't know if I would necessarily be saying that New York City or Manhattan is the best place to try to scale up a hardware company. Although it actually can be done, at least in like the 5 boroughs, maybe not Manhattan, but in parts of, let's say, the Bronx or Queens, it is very much possible to scale up hardware development, but maybe not ideal. But if you look outside New York City to New York State, there are many fantastic opportunities to scale up hardware development. So I think we may have written a report on this. I'm not sure, but yeah. So I think the answer is, if you look at New York State, there are absolutely opportunities. We can talk more about it.
Just to put an exclamation, I mean, one of the largest microchip manufacturers in the U.S. is going to be built in Syracuse. IBM invested significant amounts in one of their facilities in the Hudson Valley. So this gets back to that earlier, the disconnect between upstate and the city. New York City is great at spinning up space startups, but when they go to scale is usually when they run into one of those barriers with talent, connectivity, or testing capabilities, which is when they choose to relocate, and finding ways to tap into some of these more economical scale-up opportunities upstate and bring some of these capabilities online, maybe tied around some of the colleges and universities, might be able to dip into that. So I agree with Evan. There are challenges to that, but they are not insurmountable.
Thank you for such an engaging conversation. All the questions. This was, I would say, our most engaging town hall yet. So thank you all.
Yes, hands down. We very much appreciate the feedback and the discussion and the commentary. It was really insightful. And we look forward to seeing everyone else over the rest of the week.